To the G5 Hive in our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, who finished 8-5 last season and capped off their 2023 season with a win over Old Dominion in the famous Toastery Bowl. Sorry, Justice. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 20th. We have a special guest joining us today. The Tower Rack is an independent WKU blog. He is the head editor of that blog. When he isn't blogging, he's the owner and partner at Safeguard Insurance there in Bowling Green. He is Matt McCay. Matt can be found at the Tower Rack WKU on X. Welcome to the show, Matt.
What's going on, guys?
Awesome. So Will Friend takes over as the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach. He was previously the offensive line coach at Mississippi State. He spent some time as offensive coordinator from 2015 to 2017 at Colorado State. In 2017, Colorado State was 11th in the nation in total offense, just under 493 yards per game. And then they scored 33.4 points per game, which was good for 31st in the nation. Will he be calling the plays there for the Hilltoppers in 2024, or will it be head coach Tyson Helton?
That's an interesting question because Helton has had a history, whether it was public information or not, of kind of taking over and then not and then backing off. And so I'll be interested to see how that works out. I would guess that a guy with such experience and everything, his job is to come in and coordinate the offense. So I would think that he would start out calling the plays, but if there are issues or Tyson doesn't exactly like how things are called, then I wouldn't be surprised if he took over. But I think a Friend is a very impressive looking resume type of coach to come to WKU. So obviously I would hope that he turns it over to him. I think Helton's more of a CEO type of, that's really kind of his strength. And so I think hopefully he'll let Friend call some plays, but I guess we'll see how it goes, and I'm sure he'll adjust accordingly.
How would you describe this offense that we can expect to see here in 2024 with the new OC?
Well, I don't know if I'm sure Friend is going to bring some wrinkles of his own and everything and some new ideas, but basically WKU under Helton has had an air raid type of offense, tons of passes, run the ball to keep people honest, use the running backs in the passing game kind of thing. And so I imagine it'll be more of the same there. I do think WKU has a few running backs, and we have either quarterback that is probably the favorite can run. So there could be some wrinkles there. At times WKU's kind of had a statue of a pocket passer, and so there wasn't really a lot of prospect to be able to run the ball with the quarterback. But I imagine typical air raid, air the ball out. Hopefully some receivers will step up from the loss of some people that have left, and WKU will be able to air the ball out.
Well, that's what we like to hear. But who is going to air that ball out? So let's get to that position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Now, Matt, there is a web to untangle here, so I'm going to need your help to decipher this, and I might be off a little bit on my timeline, so keep me honest. So, last season starter Austin Reed is off to the NFL. I think he's with the Bears now. Now, for those who are not familiar with Western Kentucky, we're going to break it down. For the bowl game, Turner Helton started. He threw an interception pretty early in that game. Quarterback Caden Veltkamp was told at the end of the regular season that he would be moved to tight end, but he enters the transfer portal but stays on for the bowl game. He ends up playing in relief for Helton. He ends up then going 40 of 52 for 343 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 INT. Then Veltkamp withdraws from the portal. I mean, those are pretty good stat lines from a tight end. TJ Finley then transfers in about a month later. He comes in from Texas State. And let's not forget that the guy who started the bowl game, Turner Helton, returns. What should we make of all of that going into 2024?
I don't know. I mean, it was confusing because the intel from known and unknown or unannounced sources or whatever was that I had a guy that's from Greenville, Kentucky, which is a little west of here, and he didn't just say that quote unquote Caden is done. He said Caden is done. Like he kind of twisted the word a little bit for some emphasis. So it was interesting because he was saying like, well, Caden's checked out or whatever. He's not a real prospect to be the quarterback, and then he comes in and does what he did in the bowl game. It was interesting to say the least. It was really out of nowhere, and all I had heard was he's not really going to play a factor and not going to do anything. Turner Helton had looked good in games, and other spring practices, whatever. Seemed like it made some sense. He's the coach's nephew, so that doesn't hurt, but I don't think that the locker room would allow for him to have earned the start. I mean, you're going to have an insurrection if you're just like throwing in your family without good reason. So I imagine he earned it in practice. And I think Caden just kind of, Caden Veltkamp just kind of stepped up in the game and made something happen. He's always had a lot of talent. He's a big guy. He's 6'5", 6'6". I mean, he's a big guy and he can run and has a good arm and all that. But another factor that I would say is also TJ Finley from Texas State comes in, and he has Group of 5 experience, starting experience, played in the Power 5, started a few games. And so he's interesting too. My gut and the feel from experience, I was a quarterback manager with the Western football team for a little bit, and usually the experience won out, even though Veltkamp had the one flashy game. There are other things that factor in. So my gut kind of says that, and I think that a lot of local Bowling Green people will probably be upset about it, considering that Veltkamp is a local South Warren High School product, which is Bowling Green local high school, and so I think they'll be upset. But honestly, I think Finley probably wins the job. I'd say he's probably the one starting. Veltkamp, though, I think is certainly proven that he can play, and that you shouldn't be too worried if he does end up playing, or if Finley gets hurt, or say Finley comes in and he's not incredible. You have an option to try out. But my gut from just really reading the tea leaves and knowing how it works, I think it'll be Finley starting against Alabama if things go well. But I certainly could be wrong, and things could change too. You don't know how things go in camp, and certainly Veltkamp is a gamer. He obviously showed that. He comes in and blows it away under the lights. So maybe that's what he does again.
He certainly did. I got to watch that in person. I think I still have PTSD from it, but
Sorry, buddy.
that's another subject. Moving on to the running game, the Hilltoppers lose two guys, in Marquise Stepp and Davion Irvin Poindexter, who both graduated, but they do bring back their leading rusher from a year ago, and Elijah Young, as well as LT Sanders. What should we expect from this room here in 2024 in terms of workload? You think it's going to, I mean, typically it's been a split. You think that's what we're going to see again here?
I mean, probably. I've always liked LT Sanders. As soon as he got a chance to play a little bit, I thought he was a nice looking young prospect. I mean, he made some plays. He kind of, broke tackles, whatever. You like to see some talent kind of flash early, and he certainly did that. He had a couple of injuries and things like that kind of kept him from really busting out and those kinds of things. But I like Elijah Young too. He was a Power 5 transfer and everything, and he had a few hundred yards last year, led the team, but it was on like 400 and something yards. It was a lot of running back by committee, and we only averaged, or WKU only averaged 105 yards a game. So it really wasn't a great running attack. Obviously, you hope that those two guys can kind of bolster the running game and really be able to produce something. I think the run blocking was an issue last year. Even though the offensive line, they only gave up 12 or 13 sacks or something. It was a really low number. But I think a lot of that was Austin Reed was kind of a master at escaping some pressure, and they really had trouble opening up running lanes. So hopefully the offensive line comes together and helps out the running backs. I'm also concerned about who after those two guys for sure can come in and contribute something, because I don't really see any proven commodity besides those two. And LT even Elijah Young too. You need one of those guys to step up and be a near 1,000-yard rusher, or you need to have multiple other guys step in and do something. So a little concerning, but I think there's enough there that you're not terrified, but it is a position of concern.
Do you think so? Do you think like going into the season, we're looking at like a 50-50 workload between Sanders and Young, or a 60-40, or?
I would say probably Young seems to be the preferred back there. I don't know if it would be much more than 60-40, but Helton always says that he wants a bell cow. He wants a guy that can take over and basically do it unless he's exhausted. But it's never happened. It usually ends up being pretty split. So we'll see how that shakes out. But I'd guess 60-40, maybe a little more than that if Young is really clicking.
So, you had someone that came in the spring and added some depth, and then they turned around and transferred out shortly after spring ended, and that was running back Teron Keith. Is there anything we should make about that? It's happened to other places too, where a guy comes in and leave. Our natural assumption is like he didn't think he was going to get the playing time he wanted, but
yeah, that'd be my guess. I mean, there are already those two established. There may be someone else in there that he felt like he was behind as well. I mean, maybe he wanted to be the guy, come in and kill it, and just didn't happen. I was looking at that, and I know he transferred to USF, right? So he's closer to home. He's from Florida. I mean, that could have been a factor. He
absolutely
just didn't feel like there was enough there to stay in Bowling Green. I mean, it happens, and a lot of these kids have transferred 3 or 4 times, and so they just call it good if they don't like it and roll out. So I'm not super concerned about it. Go ahead, man.
Well, the passing game is a staple of WKU. They lost a key guy in the Yak King, first team All AAC, an NFL third-round draft pick to the New York Jets in Malachi Corley. Jimmy Holiday transferred to Louisiana Tech. Craig Burt Jr. is also out of eligibility. Dalvin Smith, Easton Messer, Katie Hutchinson are their core guys that are going to be back this year. How did that group look in the spring, and did anyone stand out to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Dalvin Smith has always been interesting. He's always produced whenever he's been given an opportunity. He had two ridiculous catches in the bowl game. One was like a cyborg, ridiculous, like backhanded. I don't even know how it. I mean, it was, and he kept running and made it to the corner. And then the other one, he, had a nice, um, one-on-one battle that he won and caught it one-handed. I mean, he's really talented.
He's massive too, man. That was the thing that stood out to me the most.
He's big. He's tall. He's tiny in terms of he's not thick.
Yeah.
So he potentially. I've been kind of surprised they didn't get more beat up in terms of physically, but yeah, he's an interesting prospect, and I'd love to see him bust out and really be a dominant receiver. He's never quite 100% gotten there yet. Certainly a good prospect, and then I really like Easton Messer too. He even though he was on the scout team a lot first little bit, but this last year because of injuries, he got his chance and he really stepped up and was really impressive. And so I feel good. And Katie Hutchinson, some of these other guys, some other decent looking backups. I mean, I'm not super concerned, but there's kind of the unknown. And last year it was really the whole team. I don't know if y'all knew this, but every position group had an injury last year where they missed at least one game. Every single position group. And so that's a huge factor in all this is like who's going to be healthy. Can we have a year where we don't have devastating injuries? Because for a 3 or 4 game stretch there, kind of beginning to middle of the year, we had the top 5 or 6 receivers not even eligible to play because of injury. I mean, it was ridiculous. So who knows exactly where all those guys are, but yeah, a decent top 3 or so, and then you should be able to fill it in from there.
Well, Malachi Corley leaves 115 targets, 984 yards, and 11 touchdowns behind. How do you think that production gets split up here in 2024?
Yeah, it's definitely concerning. And he didn't really, because of injuries, I think, mainly. And I think there were a few players that were supposed to do something and really didn't. I don't necessarily want to name names and call them out as whatever, but there were some Power 5 guys that just didn't pan out for whatever reason. People that started and then didn't end up playing most of the rest of the year. Some people didn't even really see the field. And so those guys were expected to fill it in. Plus, Michael Matheson was injured, who was a productive receiver the year before. So if you got fantasy listeners or watchers, maybe Matheson will be a nice little risk play there. Who knows if he's back or not. But, yeah, I mean, it's definitely a question mark because Malachi kind of did it on his own and still produced nearly 1,000 yards. Didn't have wonderful blocking up front, all that kind of stuff, and still was able to be really productive. But again, where does it come from this year? You're not necessarily guaranteed to know.
So you mentioned Matheson's injury. Have you heard about how that recovery is going there, and what do you think we can expect from him in 2024, assuming he's fully healthy?
Yeah, honestly, I really don't know a ton about his injury. I know I don't think he really did anything in the spring. I don't know. I really don't know exactly where that's at. But I do know if he's available, he was really productive as a young player. Kind of smaller guy, probably would function a lot like Corley did, and really nice piece that we missed last year. If you think about adding him back in and maybe he gets 700-800 yards or whatever, it would have opened up the offense a lot more. So if he's available, it's a big difference for sure. could be a number one receiver if he's healthy.
Well, how do you expect this wide receiver room to shake out this season? And will we see a target hog like we have in the past with Corley and Stearns and guys like that?
I don't know. That's kind of the question of the day. You don't know where that's going to come from because Dalvin Smith probably should be that guy, but he hasn't necessarily fully executed that. He's probably left some things on the table. Really, each year his first year he was productive in touchdowns, but didn't really do a whole lot else. They used him in the red zone, and then his role has grown. But you don't necessarily know, can he really be the number one? Easton Messer, he's a small guy, kind of twitchy, and a lot like Stearns in this style of play, and catch a lot of balls and make people miss. And he's a playmaker, but is he ready to be a full-time starter? You worry about his size. I mean, there are question marks with each of them exactly who's going to step up. Maybe it probably would be more of a by committee thing, but you don't know with TJ Finley who he clicks with. I mean, he might just come in and love Messer or love one of these other guys, Dalvin Smith, whoever it is, River Helms. I don't even know. Might love a tight end. I have no clue, and it could really change the whole dynamic of the offense.
Speaking of the tight ends, how would you describe the usage of tight ends in this offense for someone that maybe hasn't caught a game before?
Well, it's definitely different than when Willie Taggart was the coach and it was the West Coast and we had 3 of them out there half the time. It's definitely much less of a role. They'll, depending on how good the offensive line is, they might use them more to chip and then possibly contribute. I really like River Helms. I like Borland as well. But I think Helms has some ability, some pass catching ability, and Borland's more of a bigger body and everything. And I like some of the pieces that they added. It seems like they have enough that somebody should be able to step up because sometimes they've only had maybe 3 or 4 on the whole team anyway. Now I noticed they have 5 or 6, and so maybe there will be enough from that batch of guys that somebody can step up and really contribute. But I would say unless they find gold somewhere, like a few years ago we had Joshua Simon who transferred to South Carolina and was super productive, and you kind of just have to get him the ball. If you don't have a guy like that that's dynamic, then it's not a huge feature, but they exist, I guess.
Last season it seemed like River Helms certainly had times where he seemed to shine. Do you think he's kind of the leader in that room heading into 2024? Or
I would think so, yeah. Unless there's some kind of surprise, you don't hear a ton about the tight ends, so it's kind of hard to know where every single player is within that room. But he definitely seems to be the one that has had the most flashes and made some nice plays. And you notice his blocking is pretty good. It's one of those things that will keep people on the field. He's a pretty solid player and has pretty good potential. And WKU's had some good tight ends in the past make the pros. So, it can be a big feature of the offense.
Well, this offensive line lost their center Vincent Murphy to Tulane. Right tackle Wes Dorsey transfers to UCF, but they brought back left guard Quantavius Leslie, right guard Wesley Horton, and left tackle Marshall Jackson. How does this group look going into 2024?
Well, I know that's really concerning to lose some of those big names. And, Wes Dorsey, I met him at football banquet. That guy's hands ate mine alive, and I'm a big guy, but he just had these huge, massive hands. He's a big dude, bigger than some of the ones we had when we were first transitioning into the FBS when I was there. He was just a big guy. So you're going to miss some of those big Power 5 type bodies, those guys that can transfer to quote unquote higher level or whatever. We've had a few the past few years though, and it seemed like they've picked up the pieces. And this year, or this year's version of the team, I mean, I feel like there's enough there to know that you're probably going to be pretty okay. Seems like there are some decent transfer options. There's, a couple guys that are really solid, and on an offensive line, you need a few guys that are really, really good. And then if you have guys that just don't suck, you'll be okay, so hopefully there's no like major hole in the offensive line. And I feel like they're in a pretty good spot. But again, there are a lot of questions with this team. You just don't know.
So you talked about this maybe being a concern, but who do you think is going to take over there at center and right tackle?
I really don't know. I mean, I know they've played with a lot of different guys, and they're willing to move guys around. I don't necessarily have a prediction on exactly who fills in each position, but I do know that Quantavious Leslie is he's a really solid piece. Marshall's had some good moments. I just feel like there are plenty of options. Just knowing, I guess from experience, we used to have guys that they were experimenting well into camp, trying to figure out exactly who could slide in a certain spot. You just need guys that have a brain, that have an idea of where they're supposed to go, and it'll work out. I feel pretty solid about it. I just don't know where everybody's going to end up.
If you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Yeah, I was struggling to pick one, and so I wrote down a few, maybe by position. I really like Helms. I think if he can click into place, it's a really nice weapon. We haven't had a solid tight end that was healthy in several years. I really like Messer. He always seemed to, even in a spring game, he was making really nice plays. He seemed to go up and get the ball, even though he's got, a lesser size. And I like the running backs. I've always liked LT Sanders, and I like Elijah Young. I think any of those guys could have a breakout year. I don't know. I couldn't commit on that one. I don't have a strong feeling on one of them. But those are guys that I would watch for sure. All of them have some potential to be really good players immediately.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.